Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Fatal Lies Part 4. I'm excited to share with you what will unfold, so let's begin.
I don't want nobody stabbing me with love. Don't wanna waste no time getting my feelings hurt. I believe in those things we don't know much of. There's just so much to see that ain't about love. I'm ready to face my fears, I'm ready to taste the weird. I just wanna walk the hills above. My ordinary life, I could let it burn. 'Cause I just wanna go to the deep end.
Serena walked out of her office building with her keys in hand, strolling toward her car when she realized she left her cell phone in her office. Groaning, she turned and headed back toward the office building, waving to Katie as she entered the building again. Gladys was getting ready to leave as she made her way to the door. "Did you forget something?" Gladys asked. "Yeah, my cell phone," Serena answered. "Do you want me to wait for you?" Waving her hand away, Serena replied, "No, I'm fine. You go ahead. You got kids to get home to." "Okay, thanks. I'll see you tomorrow." "Yeah, bye." Serena unlocked the door to her office, walked to her desk, and picked up the phone. As she turned around, she saw something move across the hall. Fear rose in her heart as she took out her pepper spray and slowly walked out to the doorway. It was quiet and empty. "Hello?" she called out. No one answered. She took a deep breath and closed her door, locking it behind her. As she walked to the front entrance, she heard a clattering behind her. She swiftly turned her head around and saw nothing. Breathing hard, fear kicking in, she reached for the door and pushed it to find that it was locked. Panic filled her as a scream rose in the back of her throat. She turned around and saw a fist coming toward her face, and then everything blacked out. Sloan picked up his phone and dialed Serena's number. He was sitting in the restaurant where they were going to have dinner, waiting. She was half an hour late. It wasn't like her. The line continued to ring. He ended the call and lowered his phone and took one more sip from his drink and got up, strolling out to his car. He drove the short distance to the motel where she was staying and found her car wasn't in the parking lot. Great, he thought. She was probably on her way to the restaurant now. But as he walked out back to his car, he saw a blue SUV pull up, and the woman he recognized as Serena's receptionist got out. Her face was pale and written with grief. She let out a deep breath of relief when she saw him. "Oh, Detective, I'm so glad to see you," she cried. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I left for home when I realized I forgot a folder at my desk. When I went to the office, Serena's car was still in the parking lot, but the office doors were locked." Sloane's stomach lurched as he heard those words. "What?" "She was going out, and then she returned back into the building because she left her phone. I asked her if she wanted me to wait for her, but she told me to go ahead without her. And when I went back, her car was still there. But the office doors were locked from the inside. I'm worried. I came here to see if she took another ride home." Sloane swore underneath his breath. "Come with me." He rushed toward his car, driving to her office, and when he pulled up into Serena's office building and saw her white Acura parked in the lot, he turned off his engine, walked to the car, and peered in. It was locked, and there was no sign of a struggle. He turned to Gladys. "Can you let me into our office?" he asked. A moment later, he entered Serena's office as Gladys stayed behind him. He saw nothing out of the ordinary as he scanned the room, and then he heard a cry behind him and turned around to find Gladys pointing at something. "That's hers," Gladys said. Sloane turned to where her finger was pointing and realized it was a bottle of pepper spray. He took a small Ziploc bag out from his pocket and bagged it. He searched the front of the office and found nothing. He turned to Gladys, who looked ready to faint. "I'll run this to the lab and check for prints. Meanwhile, contact your boss and let him know Serena's disappearance. I'll do my job, and I need you to keep a lid on this, okay?" Serena woke up to the sound of a small buzzing in her ear. She felt her cheek and could still feel the blow that she received. Her jaw ached, and she tasted blood in her mouth, and when she touched her lower lip, dry blood cracked. She looked around her and realized she was inside a small room with bars on the windows. She was lying on a cot in the middle of the room, and around her hung pictures of flowers and clowns. She got up slowly and felt her head spin for a moment, and when she walked to the window and peered outside, the sun was setting. Where was she? She turned around when the door opened and a man with dark blonde hair entered. He was tall, had muscular arms and wore all black. His eyes were deep blue, and his lips were snarled into a wicked smile. He had a long scar across his left cheek. "Who are you?" Serena asked. The man laughed and slammed the door shut. "I'm Ricardo." Serena gasped as she took several steps back from him. "Ricardo, you're the man who paid my sister the money every month." He clicked his tongue at her. "You are a very clever girl, Serena. Your sister underestimated you." Frowning, she asked, "What are you talking about? My sister is dead." "Are you sure about that? I was just screwing her last night." To Serena's surprise, the door opened and Megan Fuller emerged. She dropped her mouth wide open as her sister, alive and well, walked into the room. Her hair had been cut short and colored black as she closed the door and strolled in as if it was the most normal thing in the world to do. Serena shook her head in fear. "That's not possible. I saw you. You were murdered." Megan laughed as she came to wrap her arms around Ricardo. "Did you actually see my body?" "I buried you. I know what I saw." Megan smiled as she stepped forward. "You saw a picture of my eyes, and then you buried someone named Joanna Lindsay." Serena felt hot tears down her cheeks as she stared at the woman before her. She shook her head as confusion, pain, and anger filled her. "No, you died." "I'm alive, sister. I'm here. Touch me if you don't believe me." Megan extended a hand to her. Serena shook her head. "Why?" Megan inhaled a deep breath. "I needed to go away because my life wasn't going anywhere, and Ricardo here promised me a new life. All I had to do was disappear from the world." The disappearing was easy, but finding the right woman who looked like me was hard. "I don't understand," Serena said. "Of course you don't. Your life has always been perfect. You got everything you ever wanted. I was always the last one on the list. I got the leftovers. Well, I got tired of getting the hand-me-downs. I wanted to be the first to get everything. I had to do it." Serena shook her head in anger. "Do you even know what you did to me? You made me mourn you for no reason." "Oh my gosh. Please, stop being so melodramatic. I wasn't a part of your life you were proud of anyway. I slept with your fiancé, which, by the way, he's a horrible lay. But when Ricardo told me that I could be his, and that together we could rule the world, it made me realize that I could do it. I could rule the world and become someone. So I found a young girl by Lake Street who was shooting dope, and she was out of money and needed some heroin. I got her into my apartment, and Ricardo here did the job. It was very bloody and very messy, but of course I had to cut myself up to make sure the DNA matched me and not her. I had to lay there pretending I was dead for a long while as the cops put together the pieces." "How did you pull it off? I mean, the detective saw you lying there. How did you make it look so real?" Smiling, Megan replied, "It was easy. There's this new drug I can take. Ricardo here injected it into me, fixed me up to look like I got my fucking lips blown apart. I lay there for 2 hours that they were digging around. I was actually afraid to do it because without the antidote after 2 hours, you really could die. But Ricardo saved me before the drug took me for real." Serena frowned. "What are you talking about?" "It's a drug to make your heart stop beating. When I was brought to the morgue, Ricardo broke in and exchanged our bodies." She paused and stared at Serena with her eyebrows raised. "Does Darren know that you're screwing that detective?" she asked. "Why are you doing this? You're my sister." "Wrong. I'm not your sister anymore. I'm just a woman who you thought you could fool around with." "What are you talking about? I loved you." "No, you loved that I screwed things up all the time, making you look like a fucking star. You got mom and dad's love and you liked it. You enjoyed being the center of attention. But me, all I got from dad was nightly visits he paid me when he wanted to screw around with me in bed." Serena screamed and shoved a picture off the wall. "Liar! Don't you ever tell that lie again." She was blaring angry as she stared at Megan. "Daddy loved you. How could you tell such lies?" Ricardo stepped forward and caressed Megan's shoulder. "Don't you ever wonder why Megan became a stripper? Because your old man did it for her. Those nightly visits made her want all the attention." "Shut up," Serena cried. "You have no business here. This is between me and her." Oh, but I do have business here, Serena. I made Megan. Without me, she wouldn't be here. I just never thought your boyfriend could get as far as he did. Megan smiled. If he didn't figure out about me and Ricardo, everything would have been fine. But I'm afraid he's dug himself a grave. Wouldn't it be nice to be buried next to him? I'm sure even as a rotting corpse, he'll still look good enough to screw. You'll never get close enough to him, Serena cried. She lunged forward and threw a punch that landed on her sister's face. All Serena heard was the crack of the nose being broken as Ricardo pulled her away. She kneed him in the groin as he went down. Megan stood up and grabbed her hair, swinging her around and slamming her head into the wall. The pressure of the hit made her lose her breath. You bitch, Megan cried as she lunged forward. Serena turned just in time to see her running toward her. She swung both arms around and slammed them into her sister's face. She heard a loud whack as Megan went down, and then she picked up a vase sitting on the dresser and slammed it into Ricardo's head as he was standing up. The man stumbled over with a bloody head. Serena didn't take a chance. She gave him two big kicks into the ribs and heard a crack as he moaned. But Megan took a hold of her head and slammed it into the iron bars by the window. The ringing of her ears almost struck her deaf as she felt the blood dripping down her face. If Ricardo dies, you die, Megan cried. Serena's hand touched a piece of the broken vase. Her hands curled around it as her sister bent down to her level. You're crazy, Megan. To accuse father of such a heinous crime, you're crazy. Megan's nose was bleeding severely as she smiled. You're jealous because father didn't come to you. He came to me, his precious angel. He was in love with me. He wanted me to make him happy. Serena laughed. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you got everything figured out, huh? You committed the perfect crime and you're left to be free, right? That's right. You forgot one thing, Megan. The woman you got to stage as you, that dopehead, she was pregnant. As soon as her sister's face twisted in fear at that statement, Serena brought up the broken vase and stabbed her sister in the left eye. Megan squealed as blood squirted out onto her, and she pushed her sister's squirming body away as she struggled to stand up. Megan screamed and thrashed on the floor as Serena grunted and stood up while pain shot through her head. She saw Ricardo lying on the ground as still as a corpse while her sister flopped around like a fish without water. The screams of her sister gave Serena chills as she walked out of the room. She walked into a large living room with white couches and a fireplace burning. There were bars on all the windows, and as she looked for an exit, a picture caught her attention. She walked to the fireplace mantel and frowned as fear rose inside her. Darren's picture was sitting on the mantel, but it wasn't his picture that made her gut turn. It was the background. The background was taken in this very room. She felt the hairs on her arm rise as bile threatened to spill out her mouth. She felt tears enter her eyes as she heard footsteps behind her. Very slowly, she turned around to find Darren standing there dressed all in white. You don't look so good, Darren said. Serena reached up and wiped the blood away from her forehead. You've known all along, haven't you? He smiled and walked toward her. Of course I knew. I was the mastermind behind this plan. Did you honestly think that Ricardo could have come up with a plan like this? He can't even book his own plane. Serena felt her heart throbbing. She felt weak as the wound from her head continued to bleed. Why are you doing this to me? What have I ever done to you but love you? Love me? You call fucking Sloan love? You were screwing around with my sister! I was, but you didn't have to find out about that. If you had only been quiet and stopped digging around, everything would have been okay. We would have been married a year or two later, we would have had kids, but you always liked to spoil things. You call finding the truth about this fake death spoiling? I can't live lies like you people. You will rot in jail for this. No, I won't, sweetie. No one has anything on me. I'll go free and live a new life as you're buried next to your sister. Serena was caught by surprise as he lunged forward and grabbed her throat. She coughed as he stared at her with his dark eyes. She clawed at his hands as he laughed and continued choking her. You were a lousy lay, Serena. No wonder I had to turn to your sister, he whispered. Serena felt her life draining as she stared into his eyes, and she knew she had to do something before her life was taken away from her. Instantly, her fingers came to his eyes, and he shook her to stop. But she forced her fingers to dig into them, and Darren tossed her across the room, and she landed on top of the couch. Her blood stained the whiteness of the furniture as he walked around her. He picked her up by the hair and dragged her toward the fireplace. Serena looked around for anything sharp to protect herself, when she saw a letter opener lying on the table a few feet across from her. She turned and bit his hand. Fuck! Darren cried as he dropped her. Serena scrawled up, grabbed the letter opener, and turned around just in time to see him charging toward her. He fell on top of her as she pushed the letter opener into his chest. She saw his eyes roll back and a gurgle of blood spurted from his lips. The blood sprayed across her as she screamed, and yet he was still able to throw a punch at her as they went down. She twisted the letter opener in his chest and heard it cut through his flesh. The blood seeped through his white shirt, making a large red spot spreading throughout his outfit. She pushed him off and withdrew the weapon, only to stab him in the face. She stumbled backward from the bloody mess as she sobbed. Her hands were covered in blood, and she wiped them on the couch as she heard the sound of Megan running toward her. Die! Her sister screamed. Serena turned around to find her sister with one bloody eye merging forward with a knife, and she stood up, but not fast enough, as her sister slashed her on the back. She gasped from pain as she felt her skin tear open, and the warmness of the blood escaped through her open flesh. She fell to her knees, reached over, and took the letter opener from Darren's face. She turned in time to see Megan coming at her, and she took that moment to stab Megan in the neck, twisting the weapon as it deeply tore her flesh apart. The knife from Megan's hand fell to the ground with a soft thud, and then Megan's body shook and she tumbled to the ground. Screaming, Serena backed out as she tried to find an exit. She ran blindly through the kitchen and found a door. She tore the knob off trying to get it opened. Light blinded her as she escaped into the outside. It was still light outside as she looked around her. She was in the middle of nowhere. There was a road up ahead about 20 feet, and she rushed toward the road as the sky darkened. She looked up as rain began falling down, and she fell to her knees. Her strength began to fail her. She crawled to the road as rain and blood soaked her, but as she reached the concrete, she felt weak, and she turned around to stare at the house. To her horror, Ricardo was running toward her with a knife. I'll kill you! I'll fucking kill you! He cried as he came closer. Serena opened her mouth to scream and got up. She felt his hands close around her throat and turned her around. She swung her hands at him, and he sliced her arms. She roared out pain and kicked at his legs. As he fell down, the knife dropped to the ground, and she reached for the knife as he grabbed a hold of her hair, pulling out a handful. She howled at the pain as she slashed the knife across his face. As Serena brought the knife back down and down again, entering his back, he swore again and again until his body limped as he fell on top of her. She pushed his heavy body off as darkness took over.
I shut my eyes, trying not to speak, pretend that I'm dreaming. I smell your breath, not listening, but I still hear you screaming. Going under, one step away till you hear what I'm saying. Sounds like thunder, and the clouds are closing in.
Serena awoke to the soft rag brushing across her body. Her eyes opened suddenly and she sat up. The nun washing her body jumped back from fright as she held the blood-soaked rag in her hands. Serena looked around as the nun began to step back from her. She was inside some sort of church. The bed she slept on was soft and full of different colored sheets. There was a cross in the corner with Jesus nailed on it. There was different colored window panes, and light shone through. Candles were lit all around her, causing a smoking air. She turned back to look at the nun. Her green eyes were full of fright. She held the bloody rag in her hands. She wore a black and white cloak that covered her from head to toe. "Where am I?" Serena asked hoarsely. She managed to step forward and offered a smile. "You are safe, my child. No harm can be done to you here. You are inside St. Michael's Church of Heavenly Hope." Right as the nun said that, the pain in her body made her wince. She groaned as she felt her back tear open. The nun gasped and ran to her side. "Oh dear, you've reopened your wound. Here, lay on your belly and I'll mend it for you," she said with deep care. Serena did as she was told, as the nun began working on her back. She felt her fingers wash over the wound as she tried hard to keep still. "Who are you?" "I'm Sister Marianne." "How did you find me?" Marianne dipped her fingers into a bowl of cream and began applying it over the wound. "We didn't find you. You came to us." Serena thought for a moment and couldn't believe her. "I don't remember coming to you." "You were beyond sane at that time, dear child. We took you in and gave you some medication to keep you calm so we can mend up your wounds. How did you come to get such horrible wounds on you?" Serena felt tears into her eyes as the pain suddenly seemed numb to all of her heart. "It's a long story, sister." "Well, I hope that you are now over that dark path. Turn to God and let Him guide you back to the path of light and pureness. You can be saved. It is not too late," Sister Mary Ann offered. Serena closed her eyes. "If you only knew, sister," she thought to herself. She lay still as Sister Mary Ann mended her wound. When she was done, she gently helped Serena over. Sister Mary Ann had placed a soft pillow under her back to keep the wound from being a discomfort. "Thank you, Sister Mary Ann. You're very kind," Serena said. She smiled. "You're welcome, child. Now, get some sleep. You are exhausted." Sloan looked up from his desk as Hans entered his office. The man looked older today for some reason. He plopped down in the chair across from Sloan before he could offer it. He ran a hand through his hair as he sighed deeply. "Tell me you got something on that bottle," Sloan asked. Hans stared at him for a long moment. "You already know the answer to that question, Sloan. You know as well as me that the only prints we were going to find were hers." "Sorry." "Shit!" Sloan got up and slammed his hand into the wall. He breathed hard as he turned back around to find Hans standing on his feet. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. I know what's going on here. You're in love with her, aren't you? Only a man in love could hurt as much as this." Sloan walked to sit down in his chair with a heavy sigh. "Tell me I'm crazy, Hans." "You're crazy. Did that help?" "No. It made me feel like shit. This is getting out of hand. This asshole is messing around, and he knows it's pissing me off, too. He's going to meet his destiny soon." Sloan turned off the lights in his office as he took his jacket from the hanger. He glanced at a photo of Serena on his desk, and inside he felt like vomiting. The one girl who he loved and he couldn't protect. He slipped on his jacket and then, for some reason, turned back around and picked up the folder from Megan Fuller. He sat down and started flipping through the pages from the case. He started once again from the beginning, looking at the murder crime scenes, the photos, the leads, the witnesses, and then the documents from her bank. Something didn't feel right to him. He stared at the number where Megan Fuller banked. He looked up at the clock. 5. It was still early enough. They would still be opened. He picked up the phone and dialed. "Hello, Marquette Banking Services. This is Rita. How may I help you?" A woman with a pleasant voice asked. "Yes, I'm Detective Sloan Ray. Who can I talk to regarding some official business?" he asked. The woman paused for a slight moment. "Let me pass you through to our business branch manager." "Thank you, Rita." Soft music came on the line as he was put on hold. Finally, a gruff male voice came on the line. "This is Jake." "Hello, I'm Detective Sloan Ray from the 5th Precinct. I'm investigating a case here and I need to ask you some questions." A long pause and then the man cleared his throat. "What is it?" "We've been investigating a case on a young woman named Megan Fuller. Has anyone called your offices to ask for information on her account or recent activity?" "I can check our records. All of our calls are recorded for training purposes. When was this call supposedly made?" Sloan checked the date to receive the documents. "Last week Tuesday around noon." "And you said the woman's name was Megan Fuller?" "Yes." "I'll check into it and give you a call back. Is there a number I can reach you at?" Sloan gave him the number, thanked him, and hung up. As he sat there in his office, a chill ran down his back. Serena looked up as Sister Mary Ann entered her room with some clothes. She smiled as she walked to her and took them from her hands, and walked around to the curtain and took the robe they had given her off. There was a pair of black pants, a blue shirt, and a pair of tennis shoes. "How are you feeling?" Sister Mary Ann asked. From behind the curtain, Serena answered, "I'm feeling better. Thank you so much for all of your help." She came back out dressed in her clothes and laid the robe on the bed and walked to sit down as Sister Mary Ann took a seat. Tell me, Serena asked. How long have you been here? Sister Mary Ann smiled as she replied, I've been here since I was 18. It's been almost 20 years for me now. I enjoy this life. It is peaceful, and when I close my eyes at night, I feel good about myself. Serena felt tears enter her eyes. I wish I could know what that is like. Sister Mary Ann reached over and covered her hands with hers. I can help you find the peace you are searching for. You just have to trust yourself. Serena started crying as she shook her head lightly. How can I find peace when all I think about is the dark things that have happened to me? I can't erase the blood, the hate. It's too much. She sobbed as the other woman came to hold her in the arms. Don't cry, dear child. God is in your life. You must open your heart first and allow Him in. Only then can you feel the true peace you long for. He will walk beside you as you face your demons. You will succeed as you walk on. Do not be frightened, dear child. Serena pulled away and wiped her eyes. How can I do that without feeling all these dark things? Tell me what happened, Sister Mary Ann said. So Serena did. She told of how her sister was murdered, only to find out later that her sister had faked her own death, how she had killed her own sister and her sister's boyfriend in cold blood to save herself, and how her own fiancé had been behind the scheme all along and wanted to murder her. She told about how she fought for her life, the frightful way how she almost met death. She told the woman everything about her life, including Sloan and the way how he made her feel. Her whole life spilled out in a moment's time. When she finished, she looked up to find Sister Mary Ann's eyes with tears. That is the most horrifying tale I've ever heard of, Sister Mary Ann said. How you survived is beyond me. You have been through the paths of hell and lived. Do you know why? Serena sobbed and shook her head. You survived because your time on earth is not yet an end. Your story is not yet completed. You must hold on now more than ever, child. You are special. God made you to be a fighter. And if you were not, you wouldn't have found us. But in the darkness of dark, you found us. And you gave us all a reason to go on when even times are hardest. In God's eye, you are a savior and a woman with a pure heart. That is why you are here, to save us all. You are the one, Serena. You must not give up. The car pulled up in front of Sloan's precinct building, and Serena turned to look at Sister Mary Ann. She felt tears in her eyes as she hugged the woman. She felt a deep comfort as she held on to her, and then pulled away as the woman had tears in her eyes. I will remember you always, Sister Mary Ann. You saved my life, Serena said. As you saved mine, she whispered. Serena smiled and got out, and turned around to walk toward the building. She turned in time to find the car pull away. Smiling at the disappearing car, she walked into the building where there were a lot of people running around, and she searched for Sloane's familiar face. She walked to the front desk as a man with dark brown hair looked up. Excuse me, I'm looking for Detective Sloan Ray. Is he around? She asked. He turned his head and shouted, Sloan! Someone's here for you! To Serena's surprise, he emerged from a room in the back. When his eyes met hers, she saw the same love burn in him that burned in her own. The toothpick in his mouth dropped to the ground as he rushed toward her and pulled her against him. Tears filled her eyes as he crushed her against him. When his hands caressed the wound in her back, she winced and gently pushed him away. He backed up and stared at his hands, which were covered in blood. You're hurt, Sloan said as he turned her around. At this moment, I don't care, Serena whispered. Let me take you to the hospital. Sloan pulled up his car and parked it in front of an abandoned stucco two-story home. He saw a yellow crime scene tape surrounding it and got out and walked to the front door, where he saw Darren's dead body lying on the ground. His face had been stabbed to being unrecognized, and his white suit was stained red by his own blood. There were blood prints all over the white furniture. A woman lay a few feet away, and he bent down to look at her. His face froze in shock as he recognized the woman as Serena's sister. Holy shit, he said. An officer entered the living room and sighed deeply. It's a fucking massacre, Detective. We got another man dead up about 2 feet from the road. He's pretty banged up, too. Sloan stared at the officer. Make sure everything is bagged. I'm going to go to the hospital to visit Serena. Hopefully she can tell me more. Sloan entered the hospital room Serena slept in and set the dozen red roses next to the table beside her. She smiled up at him, and he pulled a chair to sit down. He took her hands and held them in hers. Her forehead was bruised badly, and her cheeks were purple and yellow. Her arms were covered with white bandages, and so was her upper body. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Smiling, she replied, "I feel better already." "What happened?" Tears filled her eyes as she looked away, and then she returned her gaze. "Megan was alive." "I know. I saw her body at the house." "She was alive, and hiding out at that house where I told you. Ricardo was there. He and Megan were planning to disappear together. Somehow Darren got caught up in this whole mess too. He tried to kill me. They all did. But I managed to survive, and I walked to that church. I don't even remember walking there. But Sister Mary Ann said that I found them. She saved me and nursed me back to health. And I'm so thankful." He touched her cheek softly. "I nearly died when Gladys came to me." Serena frowned. "Gladys? What did she say to you?" "She left a folder at her office. She went back and found your car was still in the parking lot. I went back there and all I found was your pepper spray bottle. Did you see who took you in there?" "No, all I saw was this huge fist coming toward me, and I woke up in that house. Everything else just happened so fast." A knock was heard on the door as a young doctor entered the room. Sloan stood up as he came in with a clipboard. He smiled at him and then turned his sad face to Serena. "Miss Fuller, are you sure you have the name of that church correct?" he asked. "Yes. Sister Mary Ann said it was St. Michael's Church of Heavenly Hope." The doctor turned to look at Sloan and then returned his gaze to Serena. "Miss Fuller, St. Michael's Church of Heavenly Hope burned down 20 years ago." Serena sat up with a frown. "What? What are you talking about? I was there just recently. I was talking to Sister Mary Ann. Look, I don't mean to upset you, but the woman who lived in that church, Sister Mary Ann, she died in that fire. That church no longer exists. The land has been empty for the past 30 years. Nothing remains on that piece of land anymore." Sloan turned to the doctor. "Where is this place?" "According to my records, it is off on Highway 10, the old Highway 10. That piece of land is deserted now. Nothing is there." Serena shook her head. "No! I was there, okay? I was there with Sister Mary Ann. She was taking care of me. I talked to her like I'm talking to you now. She was real. I touched her." The doctor frowned. "I'm sorry. I seem to have upset you. I'll come back at another time." He turned and left the room. Serena looked up at Sloan. "Get me out of here. I have to see that place." Thank you for tuning in. Chapter 5 will be out shortly.
I don't want nobody stabbing me with love. Don't wanna waste no time getting my feelings hurt. I believe in those things we don't know much of. There's just so much to see that ain't about love. I'm ready to face my fears. I'm ready to take